You forged my name, broke into the wrong home, and every camera is recording you.
At 2:17 in the morning, 3,000 miles from home, I watched my sister break into a penthouse that no longer belonged to me. She had her 2 children with her. My parents were standing in the hallway behind her, whispering instructions through her phone, and the sentence I heard next made my blood run cold. "Oh, find her safe," my father said. "Take what she owes us before she can hide it again." What none of them knew was that I had sold the penthouse 3 weeks earlier, and the man who bought it was not someone you wanted to surprise in the middle of the night. Hello. My name is Alina Whitmore. I'm 33 years old, and until that night, I thought the worst thing my family could do was manipulate me for money. I was wrong. They were willing to steal my home. They were willing to forge documents. And when their plan finally collapsed, it happened in a way none of us could have predicted. But to understand why my own family was standing outside that door at 2 in the morning, you have to understand the role I had played in their lives for almost 15 years. I was the fixer. If my mother's car needed repairs, I paid for them. If my father fell behind on a bill, I covered it. If my younger sister, Brianna, made another bad financial decision, everyone looked at me. "Alina will figure it out." That sentence followed me everywhere. At first, I was proud of it. I had worked hard. I had built a consulting business in Northern Virginia. I had clients in Washington, New York, London, and Edinburgh. By 30, I was earning more money than anyone in my family ever had, so I helped. Then helping became expected. Expected became demanded. And eventually, every dollar I earned started to feel like evidence in a trial where my family had already decided I was guilty of having more than they did. Brianna was 4 years younger than me. She was charming, impulsive, and very good at turning a crisis of her own making into someone else's responsibility. She had 2 children, Mason and Sophie, and I loved them more than I can explain. That made everything harder. Whenever I tried to set a boundary with Brianna, she brought up the kids. "You're really going to let your nephew go without. You know Sophie needs stability. You don't understand how hard it is being a mother." For years, those sentences worked. I paid deposits. I paid school fees. I covered groceries. Once, I even paid 6 months of Brianna's rent after she quit a job because she said her manager didn't respect her energy. I wish I were joking. The breaking point came 6 months before the night of the break-in. Brianna called me on a Sunday afternoon. She wanted to move into my penthouse. Not visit. Move in. My place was a 2-bedroom luxury unit in Alexandria, Virginia, with floor-to-ceiling windows, a private elevator entrance, and a view of the Potomac that had taken me 10 years of work to afford. Brianna told me I had too much space for one person. I laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She said her lease was ending and that the children deserved a better neighborhood. I told her I could help her find another apartment, but she could not move into mine. There was silence. Then she said, "So your empty guest room matters more than your family." I told her the room was not empty. It was my office. She hung up. 2 hours later, my mother called. "Elena, why are you humiliating your sister?" That was how it always worked. Brianna made a demand. I said no. Then my parents became her legal team. My father called next. He said family property should benefit the whole family. I reminded him that the penthouse was not family property. I had bought it myself. His answer was something I will never forget. "You only got where you are because we raised you." That was the moment something inside me changed. Not dramatically. Not loudly. It was quieter than that. I simply stopped trying to convince them. A week later, I met with a real estate agent. I had already been thinking about selling. My work required more travel every year, and I was spending less time in Virginia. The penthouse had become an expensive symbol of a life I barely lived. But after that conversation, selling it became something else. It became freedom. I listed it privately. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Brianna. And 3 weeks before my trip to the United Kingdom, I accepted an offer. The buyer was Graham Bennett. Graham was in his early 40s, quiet, observant, and almost impossible to read. During the sale, I learned that he had spent years in federal law enforcement and was currently attached to the U.S. Marshal's service in a protective operations role. He didn't brag about it. In fact, he seemed to dislike talking about his job. He cared about 3 things: privacy, security, and whether the building's systems could be upgraded. The sale closed cleanly. I handed over the keys. The title transferred. The penthouse was his. There was only one strange detail. Because I was leaving the country immediately after closing, Graham agreed to let my old building's security account remain active for a few weeks while the management company completed its transfer process. I could still see door alerts and common area camera feeds. I could not unlock the residence remotely anymore. At the time, that seemed unimportant. Then came London. I had flown there for meetings, then continued north for a short consulting project. The night everything happened, I was in a hotel room, exhausted, with my phone on silent except for emergency contacts. Brianna was still on that list because of the children. At 2:17 a.m., my phone vibrated. Her message said, Open the door. I stared at it. Then another message arrived. We're outside. Mom and Dad are here. Stop being childish. For several seconds, I honestly thought I was dreaming. I opened the security app. The hallway camera loaded, and there they were. Brianna stood directly in front of Graham's door. Mason was sitting on one suitcase. Sophie was holding a stuffed rabbit and leaning against my mother's coat. My father had a folder under one arm. There were plastic storage bins. 2 duffel bags. A folded air mattress. They had not come to talk. They had come to occupy the apartment. I called Brianna immediately. She answered with, finally, "What are you doing?" "Moving in." "That apartment is not mine." She laughed, not nervously, confidently. "Elena, stop lying." "I sold it." "No, you didn't." Then prove it." I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, suddenly wide awake. "I don't need to prove anything to you." "Leave the building." My mother's voice came through the speaker. "Don't speak to your sister like that." Then my father said, "We have paperwork." That caught my attention. "What paperwork?" Brianna smiled at the camera. She knew I could see her. Then she held up a document, a lease. My name was printed across the bottom. Under it was a signature that was supposed to be mine. I had never seen the document before. According to that fake lease, I had rented the penthouse to Brianna for 12 months for $1. $1. She had created a document claiming I had given her legal possession of a home I no longer owned. I felt something colder than anger. I felt clarity. This was no longer a family argument. This was evidence. I told her very slowly, "That document is forged." My father answered for her. "It was witnessed." "By who?" "Your mother and me." I almost laughed. Instead, I took screenshots. Then I started recording my screen. Brianna said, "You can make this easy or difficult." I said, "I'm telling you one last time, leave." She turned away from the phone. My mother whispered something. Then my father said the words I mentioned at the beginning. "Once you're inside, find her safe. Take what she owes us." My stomach tightened. So this wasn't only about moving in. They believed I kept cash or valuables inside. Years earlier, I had owned a small fireproof safe in the bedroom closet. I used it for passports, old jewelry, and business documents. Apparently, my parents remembered it. They thought they were about to enter my home, claim it with a forged lease, and search for money. The problem was that my safe was gone. Graham had installed his own, and unlike mine, his was connected to a security system designed for someone who took threats seriously. I sent Graham a message. "Emergency. My family is outside your unit and attempting entry. They have forged paperwork. Call me." Then I called building security. The overnight guard answered. I gave him the unit number and explained that the people outside were not authorized residents. He said he would send someone upstairs and contact police if necessary. But before he could reach them, Brianna did something I did not expect. She pulled an old access card from her purse. My old access card. I had reported it lost nearly a year earlier. Apparently, she had found it at my parents' house after I left it there during a holiday visit. The card should not have worked, but the building had recently updated its access system, and for reasons I still don't fully understand, the old credential triggered a temporary legacy, entry mode at the private elevator vestibule. The panel flashed a warning. Brianna ignored it. The inner door released. My heart dropped. She pushed her luggage inside. My parents stayed near the elevator with the children. And Brianna walked into Graham Bennett's penthouse as if she had one. I called her again. She rejected the call. On the camera feed, I watched her move through the entry hall. The apartment looked different already. Graham had changed the furniture. He had removed my artwork. There were new cabinets, new locks, and small black sensors near the ceiling. Any reasonable person would have realized immediately that someone else lived there. Brianna didn't. She opened drawers. She checked closets. She took pictures. Then she waved my parents inside. My mother brought Sophie. My father dragged in the storage bins. Mason followed slowly. He looked terrified. That was the part that hurt the most. The adults had turned a crime into a family outing. Then my phone rang. It was Graham. His voice was calm. Too calm. "Alana, tell me exactly what's happening." I explained. He asked whether they were armed. I said I didn't think so. He asked whether the children were inside. "Yes." There was a pause. Then he said, "Do not call them again. I'm handling it." I asked where he was. 10 minutes away. Then he hung up. I looked back at the security feed. Brianna had reached the office. Graham's office door was closed. A keypad was mounted beside it. She tried the handle. Locked. My father joined her. They talked for a moment. Then my mother handed Brianna something from a toolbox. A screwdriver. I actually said no out loud to an empty hotel room. Brianna forced the tip into the door frame. An alert appeared in my security app. Tampa detected. A second alert followed. Oduanar Sigarite Erado Call a CTIV. The hallway lights changed. My parents froze. Brianna stepped back. Then every screen in the apartment turned on: the television, the kitchen display, the wall panel, even the small monitor near the entrance. They all showed the same message. Prapa odo do raham bianet. Uneni uhayajores ntr recardity nefro rcmenti nukanati. Brianna stared at the television. My father stared at the wall panel. My mother finally looked afraid. Then a live video window opened on the main screen. Graham appeared. He was sitting in the passenger seat of a moving vehicle. His expression was controlled, but there was nothing friendly in it. "My name is Graham Bennett," he said. "You are inside my residence without permission. Step away from the office. Do not touch anything else. Take the children to the entry area and wait for officers." My sister did the worst possible thing. She argued. "This is my sister's apartment." "No," Graham said. "It is mine. We have a lease. You have a piece of paper with the name of someone who has no ownership interest in this property." My father stepped toward the screen. "You can't just throw a mother and children into the street." Graham's expression did not change. "I am not discussing housing with you. I am instructing you to stop searching my residence." My mother started crying, not because she was sorry, because the plan was failing. Then Brianna held up the forged lease. "This is legal?" Graham looked at it for maybe 2 seconds. Then he said, "Good. Keep holding it up." Brianna frowned. "Why? Because the camera has a clear image now?" Her face changed. That was the first moment she understood they were being recorded, not by me, by Graham's system. Every room, every door, every attempt to open a cabinet, every word about the safe, every second. My father grabbed Brianna's arm. "Let's go." They rushed toward the entrance. The door would not open. My mother panicked. Graham said, "The entry door is in security hold. It will release for responding officers." My father shouted at the screen, "You can't imprison us." Graham answered, "You entered a secured residence after multiple warnings. Nobody is preventing you from standing safely in the foyer. Officers are less than 2 minutes away." Then my sister looked directly into one of the cameras. Elena did this. Even from another country, I could hear the hatred in her voice. "Alana set us up." That accusation was so absurd that I finally laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because I suddenly realized how completely she had built her life around one belief. If something went wrong, it had to be my fault. The police arrived first. The building security came with them. The door released. 2 officers entered. A third stayed near the children. Everyone started talking at once. Brianna waved the fake lease. My mother cried. My father demanded a lawyer. Graham's face remained on the screen. Then he arrived in person. The hallway became silent. He walked in wearing jeans, a dark jacket, and the expression of a man returning home to find strangers searching through his belongings. He showed identification to the officers. They spoke quietly. Then he produced the closing documents for the penthouse, the deed, the settlement record, proof of ownership. Brianna's $1 lease became worthless in about 30 seconds. But that was not the end. One of the officers asked me to stay available by phone. They wanted to know whether the signature on the lease was mine. I said no. They asked whether I had given Brianna permission to enter. No. Had I authorized my parents to remove property? No. Had I told them the apartment had been sold? Yes. I had told Brianna before she entered. The officer asked if I could send screenshots of the messages. I sent everything. Then he asked if I had a recording of the phone call. I did, including my father's instruction to find the safe. That changed the atmosphere. Until then, my parents had been trying to present the situation as a misunderstanding, a family dispute, a housing disagreement. But find her safe and take what she owes us did not sound like a housing disagreement. It sounded like intent. My father stopped talking. Brianna started crying. My mother sat down. The children were taken to a quiet area with a female officer and building staff. I was grateful for that. They had done nothing wrong. They were just trapped inside the consequences of adults who should have protected them. Then came the twist I did not know about. Graham's office was not just locked. It contained protected case materials related to his work. Nothing that put the public in danger, and nothing Brianna actually managed to access. But her attempt to force that door made the situation far more serious than she had imagined. Graham did not threaten anyone. He did not need to. He simply told the responding officers he wanted a complete report and intended to pursue every lawful remedy available. That sentence frightened my family more than shouting would have. At around 4 a.m. my time, I was still sitting on the edge of my hotel bed. I had not moved for almost 2 hours. My sister had been removed from the building. My parents had been escorted out. The children were released to their father, Brianna's ex-husband, after officers contacted him, and my phone began exploding. First my mother, then my father, then Brianna, then relatives. I did not answer. The messages followed the same pattern. "How could you do this to us? You embarrassed your family. You could have stopped this. You knew what would happen." That last one was interesting. Because yes, I had warned them. I had told them the apartment was sold. I had told them not to enter. I had told them the lease was forged. They continued anyway. For the first time in my life, I did not rescue them from the consequences. And they hated me for it. When I returned to Virginia 5 days later, the story had already spread through the family. But Brianna had changed it. In her version, I had secretly sold the family home to a federal officer and arranged a trap because I was jealous of her children. There was only one problem. Graham's cameras existed. So did my messages. So did the forged lease. So did the closing records. Facts are inconvenient when your entire defense depends on emotion. I hired an attorney. That was another first. Usually, when my family attacked me, I tried to solve things privately. Not this time. My attorney told me to stop communicating directly with Brianna and my parents. He preserved the messages, the recordings, and the documents. Then he found something that made my hand shake. The forged lease was not created the night of the break-in. It had been prepared almost 2 weeks earlier. And attached to a draft email on Brianna's laptop was a second document, a letter claiming I owed my parents $180,000. The reason? They had calculated the estimated cost of raising me from birth to age 18. Food, clothes, school supplies, utilities, even a portion of their old mortgage. They had turned my childhood into an invoice. And that was what my father meant when he said, "Take what she owes us." They genuinely believed my success had created a debt they could collect themselves. When my attorney showed me the document, I did not cry. I thought I would. Instead, I felt strangely calm. For years, I had wondered what amount of help would finally be enough. Now I had my answer. There was no amount. If I gave them $10,000, they would remember 20. If I gave them 20, they would need 50. If I gave them 50, they would say I had more. The problem had never been need. The problem was entitlement. The legal process took months. I won't pretend it was dramatic every day. Real consequences move slowly. There were interviews, lawyers, statements, court dates, arguments over the forged document, arguments over intent, arguments over damages. Graham was patient and precise. He submitted the security footage and repair costs. I provided evidence that my signature had been copied from an old family document. Brianna eventually admitted she created the lease. She claimed she believed I would accept it after the fact. My parents insisted they thought it was a harmless family arrangement. Nobody believed that explanation after hearing the recording about the safe. The final outcome was not some movie scene where everyone went to prison for 20 years. It was more realistic, and in some ways more satisfying. Brianna faced criminal charges related to unlawful entry, attempted theft, property damage, and the forged document. Through the final legal resolution, she received a suspended jail term conditioned on strict compliance, probation, restitution, and mandatory counseling. My parents were not treated as innocent bystanders. Their involvement was documented, and they were required to pay part of the restitution connected to the damage and legal costs. There were protective orders. There were no more surprise visits, no more midnight demands, no more using the children as messengers. But the part that felt like revenge had nothing to do with the courtroom. It happened at a family gathering months later. My grandmother was turning 80. I almost did not go. Then I decided I was tired of surrendering rooms just because my parents might be inside them. I arrived late. Brianna was there. My parents were there. Nobody spoke to me at first. Then an aunt I had always liked came over and quietly asked, "Did they really make a document saying you owed them for raising you?" The room went still. My mother looked horrified. Apparently, that part of the story had not reached everyone. I could have protected her. Old Elena would have. Old Elena would have smiled and said it was complicated. Instead, I says, my aunt asked, "How much?" $180,000. Someone across the room actually choked on a drink. My father stood up. That was private. I looked at him. So was my home. And nobody said anything. My father's face went red. My mother looked down, and for the first time, I watched the family dynamic shift without me doing anything to force it. People started asking questions. Not cruel questions. Simple ones. Why was there a fake lease? Why were they looking for a safe? Why had the children been brought there after midnight? Why did they keep saying I had trapped them if I was in another country? Their story could not survive ordinary questions. That was the revenge. Not humiliation. Not screaming. Not destroying them. Just refusing to carry their lies for them. After that night, I changed my phone number. I moved permanently. I sold or donated most of the things that had tied me to the version of myself who thought love meant endless access. I still saw Mason and Sophie, but only through arrangements that did not require direct contact with Brianna. Their father made that possible. I never spoke badly about their mother to them. They would understand the truth in their own time. As for Graham, he repaired the damage and stayed in the penthouse. A few months later, he sent me a picture of the view at sunset. Under it, he wrote, "Quiet tonight?" I laughed for a full minute. That apartment had never been quieter than after my family stopped believing they owned a piece of me. People sometimes ask whether I regret selling the penthouse without telling them. No, I regret waiting so long to understand why I felt I had to hide the sale in the first place. Healthy families may disagree. They may be disappointed. They may even get angry. But they do not forge your signature because they believe your boundaries are negotiable. They do not turn your childhood into a bill. They do not teach you that success is something you must apologize for. And they do not call theft family helping family. For most of my life, I believed revenge meant making someone hurt the way they hurt you. I don't believe that anymore. The best revenge I ever got was much quieter. I stopped paying. I stopped explaining. I stopped rescuing. I let the truth stay in the room after I walked out. And once I did that, my family discovered something they should have learned years earlier. They had never been entitled to my money. They had never been entitled to my home. And they had never been entitled to me. That penthouse door locked behind them in the middle of the night, but the door that really closed was the one I should have closed years before. This time I never opened it again. Narration notes delivery calm and controlled at the start, increase urgency during the break and insecurity sequence. The pause briefly after major reveals, especially the forged lease, the safe instruction, the screens turning on, and the childhood invoice. Keep dialogue voices distinct through pacing rather than exaggerated character acting. This is designed for one narrator. Estimated narration length depends on delivery speed. A dramatic 145 words per minute will run longer than a fast conversational read.